We are now recording and it is 7:09, the start of the March 25th Charter Revision Commission meeting.
Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. And again, my apologies. Okay, first up, we won't go through the rules of conduct or anything. We do have a quorum, correct?
I'm not sure.
What's the total number?
We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 members plus yourself, regular members.
How many people are on this?
If it's only 9, we're okay. If not, we're probably shy.
We have one.
One good day and look how hard it is to conduct business.
You have 8 members.
So we're good.
Oh, good.
Linda, thank you. I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda as presented. Do I have a second?
I second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Use your hands. This fits on one iPad screen for me. This actually works pretty well. The minutes of March 9th, 2021. Any corrections, changes? I'll make a motion. We accept the minutes as presented. All those in, can I have a second on that? Mark DeRozier. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Is that unanimous? Were there any abstentions?
No.
We were all here. Thank you very much. Audience of citizens, anybody? We don't have any citizens.
Rick, this is Linda.
Linda, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
I wanted to make a comment at some time during the meeting on behalf of the Board of Assessment Appeals about the charter. So I don't know whether to do it here. Discussion of the charter.
Well, it's not on the agenda, so why don't you bring it up now? It would be good.
Okay. I met with the other 2 members of the Board of Assessment Appeals March meeting I guess it was last week or the week before. And as part of our discussion, we discussed the charter, the current charter, which has payment for the Board of Assessment Appeal members in Section 7. And yes, the consensus of the board after we discussed it was to recommend to the Charter Revision Commission that it be left in the charter. Some of the reasoning was that we are just a 3-member board. It's very difficult to get people to run for that position, given that you only meet in March and September. And you know, it's kind of like a little incentive. I actually went to town hall and I went back and I looked through all the charter revisions, and that particular section was for the Board of Assessment Appeals was put in the charter in 2003, I believe. There was no reason given other than the fact that there were surrounding towns that also had it in their charters at the time. So
And we're not currently paying members.
we are currently paying members.
We are.
And just curious, what is the compensation?
It's not much. It's like, what is it, Mark? $12 and something. It's the floater rate.
Oh, so we get a bargain on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's that. I just wanted to bring that forward because it's in the minutes of the Board of Assessment Appeals meeting, but that was the consensus of the board at that time.
Okay.
I can comment on that. On page 20 of the draft that was sent out by Rich Roberts, there is a state statute that talks about compensation for this particular board. And unfortunately, it's inartfully worded. And because of how it's inartfully worded, it's best to leave the language in our charter and provide for the opportunity for compensation to that particular board. There's nothing in the charter that says they have to be compensated. They're presently being compensated. That's fine. It can change in the future to go to 0, or it could go higher.
So that was all I had to say.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Rich, I also had one email from a resident that I'll read into the minutes under comment.
Okay, please.
So this is from Vera Englert. She said,
Okay.
I would like the charter to include the budget going to referendum with proof of ID. That's her comment.
Are there a lot of people sneaking into our town meetings to vote on our charter who don't live in Columbia?
No, but maybe in a referendum, you would have to prove your residency.
Correct.
So that would be a given.
Right, but wasn't she saying she wants the budget to go to referendum every time?
Yes.
Yeah, but we don't have a problem now that people are voting who aren't in town.
Well,
I think
I think
her point is she'd like it to always go to referendum, which
Oh, I
is the
know.
same point Lisa made.
Right.
Okay,
As
let's
did,
put that under advisement. How's that?
oh, too hot.
That's all I have, Rick.
Okay, thank you so much, Mark. I'm going back to I've been trying to do this without printing out the agenda. Doesn't work as well for me. Bear with me a second. I'm sorry. Okay. My desktop is unruly. Apologize for the delay. Okay, I'm all set now. Okay, next up is to get back, go back to our review of the charter recommendations. We got a really nicely marked up one from Jen with red for all of the revisions. Probably the same. Is that the same one that Rich sent out to us?
Yes, and Rich just joined the meeting.
Hi, Rich.
Rich is in the house.
Okay, looking at the charter, the draft that came out to us, why don't we go through and talk through the revisions as they are in red? I don't know that we need to review what was recommended. I think this came from you, Henry, about the addition of and agencies under Article 7 and 8.
yes.
Okay, everyone good with that?
Yeah.
I assume so. Next change that we've discussed is about legislative bodies. And do you want me to share this screen with everybody? Would that be easier?
No, I
Yes.
just want you to tell me where you are.
I'm section 1.4.
If
I'm
you
sorry.
could share the screen, that would just make it so much easier.
Page 1.
Rick, I've actually got two technical things, one in 1.1 and one in 1.2. If we want to just walk through everything at the same time, although I could defer until the end after you've gone through all
No,
the
I'd
red ones.
like to keep it in order so we can keep our comments in order. I think it'll be
Yeah.
easier to modify the document if we come to a consensus about what we want to do.
Mhm.
Go ahead, Henry.
In 1.1, it says all residents of the town shall constitute a body politic. Well, we do have qualified voters who are taxpayers in town, but not necessarily residents in town, and they're part of the body. So I think we should change residents to say all qualified voters in town. I don't think we need to say electors and qualified voters because the definition of qualified voters, if you go and look at the state statute, includes electors of the town.
Okay, everyone in agreement that that will be incorporated?
Yeah.
Pardon me?
Yes.
Okay, so 1.1 electors.
Qualified voters instead of residents. It's the larger category. Qualified voters is the larger category.
It covers everybody.
Right. Electors are just people who are resident who are 21 and qualified to vote in a federal election or whatever.
Okay. And you said 1.2, you had something?
I believe in the second line, it says all securities and liens. It says in the town. I think it should say of the town. Or better maybe in which the town has an interest. What it's basically trying to do here is to say that the town continues to own all the properties it did before we changed it, and it continues to now, and all obligations and contracts to which it's bound or continue to be binding, which is the second paragraph there. But the first one sentence paragraph, I question in the town because it's ambiguous, and of the town is a little bit better, but that's also somewhat ambiguous. And if it's all right with you, I would suggest we leave it to Rich and I to decide, some simple language there that just clarifies that issue.
Okay.
Essentially, Henry, all this is saying is that as to property and rights and debts of the town that existed before this charter was incorporated or was passed, they continue. There's no intention for an interruption of any kind.
Correct. Where
Is that the purpose of this?
by adopting a new charter, amended and restated charter, we're not looking to shirk any of our responsibilities, nor are we giving away any of our rights.
Well, maybe to just say that.
We'll have you get back to us.
Yeah.
That'll be a clarification.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything under 1.3? So we had the changes that we discussed about legislative bodies. Does everyone want to peruse this? I'm going to try and make this a little bigger.
I can comment while everybody reads it. I think it's very good language, but I think we may want to go one step further and say that because it says in both cases, the legislative powers include but are not limited to the powers set forth in either Article 2 or Article 3. But I looked at Article 2 and Article 3. There was no place where legislative powers are in fact limited anywhere. So there ought to be an outside limit. And so I think a sentence somewhere along the line to say that the legislative powers granted to the town meeting or the Board of Selectmen shall, however, not exceed those allowed as a matter of state law, or something to that effect, so that there's an outer limit on power, because otherwise it's completely open-ended.
You don't think that that the words and as are allowed implies that limitation?
Isn't that limitation already implied because the power of the locality is subordinate to the power of the state?
Well, it would be illegal to go further than that, but this could be arguing that we, trying to push it to an illegal level, and we've got a number of other places where we've limited to state law. I'm reading the one again with I think you're right. I think that is a sufficiently limiting language to limit the next two sentences. So I would withdraw my comment.
Yeah,
Okay.
and the point that I was trying to make by wording it that way was that there are provisions in the budget section that, give certain powers to the town meeting. There are provisions in Article 8 that give some powers to the Board of Selectmen. I just didn't want to have to list them all.
Okay. So 1.4 as presented is okay. I'm gonna move on to, so 1.54, the red here is a renumbering of some sort, I believe. And then there were some minor changes in here. To changing the date on item D under 1.54. And then under item J, there was a change as provided in Article 2 of the Connecticut General Statutes. I'm scrolling through item 2.1 and 2.2.
Well, I'd like to come back to the definitions if I could, the
Sure.
1.5. One question that I have, the charter uses a mixed approach of having some defined terms capitalized and many defined terms not capitalized. If you have defined terms capitalized, when they're capitalized in the document, you know that it's a defined term and you can look back and see it and you know it can be what it means. If it's used in the document in an uncapitalized fashion, then you know it's the generic word and not limited to the definition that's been given to it. We haven't followed that convention ever in our charter. And my question is it sufficiently of concern that we should have, with the word searching now capability to change it so that it is more exacting in that regard? Or are we happy with the fact that we've lived with it and we don't want to fix it if it isn't broken?
Well, Henry, it's usually my habit to capitalize defined terms. And so generally I would say, yeah, go for it. But I think that capitalizing may.
Yes, yeah, I mean, there's certain words
shall,
like that. Yeah, yeah.
And I'm not even so sure about holiday. But if you want to capitalize elector and appropriation and agency, go
Yeah.
for it.
Okay,
Qualified voter.
very
Okay.
good. And I want to also highlight here, so that people keep it in mind, the definition of agency also includes a solo officer. So if we have a tree warden and it's a one-person job, he's also, or she's also an agency. So we need to, I don't think it has any particular adverse effect as I look through it, but people want to keep that in mind. I did have a catch on the definition of appropriation. Appropriation means an authorization granted by a town meeting. But then I think it needs to say, or is otherwise provided in section 9.11 of Article 9 of this charter, to clarify it, because 9.11 does allow an appropriation to be made by the Board of Selectmen in certain instances when it's a small grant. So I think putting that there and then saying to expend town funds and to incur obligations for specific governmental purpose in accordance with, and I would just at the end just say said section 9.11, because we don't have to repeat the full site.
I'd like to add something on qualified voter. I think in the past, it's somebody who owns something like a car or something, or house, or at least a car in town that's worth $1,000. And a qualified voter should, sometimes you get people who are, say, 18 or 19, they're voters, they may not own anything. Can they still vote at a town meeting?
The 7.6 is where that gets filled in, Judy. Yes, a qualified voter also includes an elector. And so if you have an 18-year-old high school senior who owns no property in town but is resident in town and is registered to vote in a federal election, he is an elector or she's an elector,
Right.
and therefore would also be a qualified voter.
See, I think what's happened though at the town meetings is they'll say they have, that's not the way they say it. Maybe we got to be careful what the moderate, how they interpret that. Because I've heard them say they have to own $1,000 in property in town, or at least $1,000 to be able to vote. And so I've heard people question.
I think
could they
that's
vote?
something to address at that meeting. I don't think we need to
Yeah,
address.
you're right. You're right. It's more of a moderator issue that we should clarify with them.
And
Yeah,
that,
if you-
that really, that only applies to somebody who's not a resident, right?
Yeah, and they make that point, Judy.
I've heard them say, I mean, I've heard people question it, if they could vote. It's, somebody who's an actual
Yeah,
voter.
I
in
don't
town.
think that's something we need to address within
Right,
the charter.
you're right. It's just,
I'd like to
Okay,
pass for that.
can
I
we-
want to keep this moving.
Well, so wait, can we just go back to appropriation? Henry, if we just deleted the words section 9.11 of Article 9 and just said governmental purpose in accordance with this charter, wouldn't that be appropriate? Because appropriation would mean that no matter where it is in the charter, wouldn't it?
But we still need, there is an exception, and so that we do have to add language after town meeting, because an appropriation isn't only that can be authorized by a town meeting. It can also be authorized by the selectmen under the wording of 9.11. So that's the reason to add it there.
So why wouldn't we just say by a town meeting or the Board of Selectmen?
Well, because it's a limited right of the Board of Selectmen, a very limited right as detailed on 9.11. And we could say as permitted to the Board of Selectmen when otherwise authorized by the charter. But the advantage of cross references is to help people find things.
Yeah.
If you take the cross references out, you're going to pay your future attorneys more money to find where it's buried in the charter because they're not familiar with it. So, having the cross references does serve an interpretive guidance.
Okay. All right.
This, okay,
Let's
let's
go.
move past that. Anything else
In
under
town, in town,
154?
yeah, in town meeting J, I think we have, if we're going to add 1.4, which we did, we have to tweak this a little bit. So I think it works if we say a town meeting is a legislative body rather than the legislative body of the town, and shall have the power and authority provided in Article 2 and add the word of this charter.
With other legislative bodies being the Board of Selectmen and Planning and Zoning?
Yes, well, the other legislative body technically is just, according to the charter, is just the Board of Selectmen. The zoning commission has statutory authority with respect to its regulations, I guess, or
Those are binding regulations, so in its own sense, it's also legislative, as I've always understood it. That's from the legal seminars that have been put on by the Connecticut Bar Association.
yeah,
in Middletown.
I'll ask Rich to speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, the Planning and Zoning Commission acts in either an administrative or a legislative capacity, depending on whether it's interpreting or enacting regulations. But I think that's outside of the scope of the powers of the town generally here in the charter. Just saying that the town meeting and the Board of Selectmen are the legislative bodies of the town doesn't diminish in any way the statutory powers of the Planning and Zoning Commission.
So you still want to go to is a town meeting is a legislative body of the town? change it from the?
Yes, because we're making, if this is adopted, we're making the Board of Selectmen a legislative body too. So there are two legislative bodies
Okay,
as is set forth in the section 1.4 that we just approved.
Well, I think it's also worth pointing out that we're not changing anything to give the Board of Selectmen additional powers. We're just recognizing that they do have certain legislative powers under the existing charter and making that clear.
Yes.
moving along to, are we good to move along to Article 2? I take that as a yes.
Yes.
So
Yes.
for 2.1, so the first statement, the first section, 2.1, is the statement that these shall be vested in the town meeting, limiting the, in any way, what the powers of the Board of Selectmen are?
I think that's what the note's about.
This is just saying that the legislative powers of the town, to the extent that they're talked about in Article 2, are vested in the town meeting. And when we go to Article 3, it says the legislative powers, to the extent that they're described in Article 3, belong to the selectmen. So I think it works.
Is everyone good with this?
Mhm.
Well, so would it make sense to say that a little more specifically? The legislative powers described in this Article 2 and the legislative powers described in this Article 3, so that people aren't feeling like they got
Well,
whipsawed?
that's what we've said in section 1.4 back at the beginning, where we say they're authority. So we've kind of set the stage in 1.4 already, and all we're doing here in 2.1 is kind of shorthand saying these are the ones that belong to the town meeting. And then when we get to Article 3, we'll say these are the ones that belong to the selectmen.
All right.
Okay, I'm good with that. Everyone good here?
Yeah.
I think this is, I don't have any question about section 2.2. Anyone else?
We don't have a definition for budget meeting.
So did we need to add that under 1.54?
I think it would be a good idea, and I would say let Rich come up with that and put that in there. And the definition may well cross-reference to something back in Article 9, but I do think we need to have what the budget meeting is.
Well, then should we define, well, do we need to define all the kinds of meetings? I think it's just a descriptive word.
No, well, the budget meeting is a very specific meeting that goes to the fiscal decision-making of the town, and it's different than any other meeting. So I do think it's worthwhile having it be defined, because when we're back in Article 9, it's referring to that meeting wherever it's used as being the budget meeting. Without further, we don't need to define the term special town meeting or selectmen's meeting or anything like that. Those are just meetings, but the budget meeting is a special event.
Okay,
What I'd suggest is that I just cross-reference the section of the statutes that talks about the annual budget meeting the same way we did with the annual town meeting up here, just so that you know what it is. I forget where it is. It's
Okay.
7344 or something like that.
Actually, it doesn't, it says in the Connecticut General Statutes, but it doesn't say where. I guess you could add that unless you're afraid it's going to move.
I just scrolled down to 9.8 and 9.9, and it sounds like it's defined rather well there. So is there a need to define it here also?
I don't feel that there is. I just, and if we're in, do we need to capitalize budget meeting? If it's just describing a type of meeting and it's not a defined term?
But you
Well-
used it a lot later on.
The advantage of doing it, again, is the convention. You have a section where there's definitions. And if you're looking for it wherever you are in the document, you know you can get there. It's just ease of use of the document. It certainly isn't changing anything technically at all. It's just ease of use. So you can find your way through things more quickly. If you see budget meeting here and you say, well, what's the budget meeting? You don't know to look to Article 9 necessarily.
Well, that would be
Okay.
another alternative, is say as described in Article 9, but
Yes,
I
exactly.
don't have any problem with putting in a definition. What doesn't hurt anything.
Okay.
Either
So
way,
we're gonna put a definition under 1.54 and it'll be a capitalized defined term within the document.
I guess it does help to have all that stuff in one spot, the definitions.
So we're good here?
Yeah,
Okay. Anything before we get to section 2.4D?
yeah, in 2.3, I question the reference to elector in the last line. I think it should be qualified voter, because qualified voters include electors, and I don't think we need to.
When you say the last line, help me find
Where?
that.
The first
Oh,
paragraph of 2.3.
The first paragraph.
Okay. So you want that to say what?
Qualified voters. Any
You really want a
qualified,
non-resident running your town meeting?
You want to what?
I mean, this is just a question of who calls the town meeting to order.
Right.
well,
it's a process, in case none of the selectmen are there,
well, if you don't have an elector there, what are you gonna do?
or any elector or any qualified voter. I mean, that's probably never going to happen.
Right.
Yeah,
you're-
because
you're-
there'll be
you're-
nobody there to verify who the voters are if the registrars or the town clerk isn't there.
Yeah, well, you can't know who's an elector either.
Okay, so let's go back. What is it you're proposing? Changing
Well,
I-
elector to voter?
well, that's what I'm asking you to think about. And Rich raises the question, do you want to go as low as saying that somebody who is a taxpayer in town but not a resident could call the meeting to order? And the answer would be, yeah, if the rest of the people present vote to say okay. But we could say any elector, or if no elector, any qualified voter.
Why don't we leave it the way it is?
I mean, I can't imagine how, because it says by another selectman designated in writing by a first selectman or an absent thereby so it's got to be somebody in writing or somebody who's just there. I don't know.
Yeah, well, the person who's just there anybody couldn't do it. It would have to be somebody who was nominated by the people there and call it to order, I would assume.
Yeah, it just,
Why don't we leave it the way it is?
Well, I think we're in the weeds.
Problem with this.
I don't think it
Well,
would happen.
You may have a meeting where there's no elector.
So then can't have a meeting.
Yeah,
Well, yes, you could, because the qualified voters could decide. You could have a quorum of qualified voters at the meeting.
see, I'm thinking we should just take it out, because I don't think we should even consider having a meeting if none of the selectmen are there. Or other commission representatives, not just a qualified voter. It just seems weird.
Well, how about if we said in the absence thereof by the moderator?
Or other commission representative or something.
Well, this is a town meeting. We're only talking about town meetings.
I know, but it's still, it would be an elected commission person if it, other than just a elector present.
Yeah, but to have a town meeting, you gotta have a moderator, and that person is somebody who's been appointed to run the meeting. And it needs to be an elector in the first place. So we wouldn't be, I would assume, having a town meeting if we didn't have a moderator.
So instead of any elector present, you're proposing we say the moderator.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, that, yeah.
Moderator is fine.
I don't like the way it's written at all by any elector. So I would go with moderator for sure. Mm.
Okay. Is there anything else? What's the next section somebody would like to bring up, or should I scroll to the cha-
I don't want to belabor that, but I mean, until you call the meeting to order, there is nobody who's the moderator, because that's the first item of business.
Isn't the moderator automatically appointed by how we say the moderators are set in rotation? The Robert's Rules requires that the town meeting approve the moderator?
Right, but they're not approved until at the town meeting. You
And
vote,
after it's been called to order.
right, you vote to approve them. Even though they're pre-approved, you still say, yes, we agree.
Well, the person is there, an elector, and is somebody that's been appointed, so it's more than just an elector that walked in off the street. So it's up to the members of the commission.
Can we say the proposed moderator?
Sure.
At least they know how to run the meeting.
Mhm.
Okay. So any elector will be replaced by the proposed moderator, president.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, anything else under 2.3?
I think there's a typo in 2.3C. And one of the things I would ask, we got 2.3, the first paragraph has no designation, no A in front of it. Then we come down and have A, B, and C. And I don't think there is a colon at the end of the first paragraph. So I'm wondering whether we shouldn't have where it says all town meeting, paragraph A would become B, which paragraph B would become C, and what C would become D.
Okay, good. Everyone good with that?
Yeah.
Sure.
And then if you look at the one that is labeled C, meeting shall be the town clerk if absent the town clerk's designated representative. And it then says if thereby, and I think
You're having a hard time hearing you, Henry.
it then says, I think that thereby should be there be. And so it should read, and if there be no designated representative, an elector shall selected by the town meeting for such purpose. Thereby should be there be. I think it's a typo.
Well, that makes sense. And it should be
Okay.
and it would be 2 words.
Yes.
They've been doing this all along. Okay. Section 2.4.
I have a question with respect to E. If there's no problems with the changes in D.
I don't have a problem with them. E,
Yes.
Henry, what is
Yes,
it?
because sections 3.3 and 3.6 of the charter, this brings into conflict granting clarifying legislative powers to the Board of Selectmen, because sections 3.3 is where we give the legislative powers and designate the legislative powers of the selectmen. So where we say except as provided in section 3.3 and 3.6, not sure. I think the language needs to be clarified because we're clarifying the legislative powers. 3.6 is emergency ordinances.
I don't understand what your concern is.
It's clarity. What this is saying is any contract agreement by the Board of Selectmen for federal use or state use of town property has to go to a town meeting. And then we say, except as provided in sections 3.3 and 3.6.
Yeah.
And 3.3 gives very broad authority now in section B4 to say the Board of Selectmen shall use their administrative and legislative powers under this charter to maintain a constant concern for the general good and welfare of the community. That broad grant of legislative powers kind of emaciates any limitation that's designed, that's thought to be in place for 2.4, because it says if 3.3 is involved, the selectmen can go ahead and enter into a contract with the federal government to use town property without a town meeting. And I would wager that if the selectmen wanted to have the federal government use town property, they could find a reason to get it under B4 and never take it to a town meeting. So all I'm trying to do is point out that we're, as it's now worded, E loses a lot of its intent, which was to say that these things had to go to a town meeting.
So are you proposing that the last clause of that paragraph be deleted?
I don't know. I put an asterisk beside it so we would talk about it, because
So isn't the fundamental question here is you're saying you don't want the Board of Selectmen, or we may not want the Board of Selectmen to be able to bind us to an agreement with a higher level government without a town meeting, or if we do, we want to define that, what can be done and what can't be done.
Right. And
so if they wanted to deed Columbia Lake to the state of Connecticut, the ground under it, we don't want them necessarily to be able to do that.
So can I ask a question?
Sure.
Because I'm not intimately familiar with all of these things that might happen. What can anyone think of something that the Board of Selectmen might enter into a contract with the federal or state government about that you wouldn't want to have go to a town meeting?
A nuclear missile site.
No, that you wouldn't. That you wouldn't want to have go to a town meeting.
Well, I think my solution would be to wipe out section 3.3, which is the general one, and leave 3.6, which is an emergency ordinance, which has a limited time frame in which says, yeah, in the time of a hurricane or a tornado or whatever, they can let FEMA come in and use the town and run the town hall as an emergency shelter or something like that. That I think makes sense. So if you were looking for me to make a suggestion, I would just say we would change that proviso to say except as provided in section 3.6 of Article 3, and just limit the selectmen's ability to do that type of a contract to an emergency.
So
Okay.
you want to take out 3.3A3 that allows the Board of Selectmen to enter into agreements with the State Department of Transportation?
No, because that's, yeah. Well, then we could just say 3.3, and that's what I would do, would be to make the 3.3 more specific. To say 3.3,
Let's leave these in here for now and go through this under 3.3 and 3.6, okay?
Yeah, because I'm not sure what you're talking about because we don't have the sections there.
Okay, let's leave this for the time being where it is, and when we get to 3.3 and 3.6, we'll review that.
yep.
Okay. We're good on everything in 2.5 here.
In 2.5A, I had a question.
What's that?
It says when, if it's a referendum recommended by the Board of Selectmen and after reasonable discussion at the town meeting, it is going to go to a referendum. After other business has been completed at the meeting, the moderator shall adjourn the town meeting to reconvene not less than 7 or more than 14 days thereafter. Now, it's not clear whether the reconvened town meeting is reconvened at the referendum or whether it's to be reconvened after the referendum has taken place to announce the result. There just seemed to be something missing there, and I was going to ask Rich whether he thought there was something missing.
Because when you take a town meeting, you adjourn it to a referendum, and that 7 to 14 days is the statutory language there, so that the referendum is the adjourned town meeting 7 to 14 days later.
All right, so the referendum is the adjourned town meeting, and there is no
Yeah, there's no further regular town meeting action.
okay, very good. If we're following statutory language, that's fine. Very good.
We're going to keep moving through this.
Yep.
Thing else under 2.5, anyone? Petition modification under item B, anything prior to that?
I've got on 2.6 a typo or grammar actually in first paragraph. All ordinance resolutions or other actions taken by vote of the Board of Selectmen, except those making appointments or removals or regulating exclusively, there should be its internal procedure, because it's referring to the Board of Selectmen. It's not referring to the Selectmen.
Okay. Anything, are we good all the way down to the lower section of item B?
Yes, I have a punctuation change to suggest.
And what's that, Henry?
I'm trying to figure out where to start reading.
Item A should be capitalized also for if.
Yeah, yes.
If we start with the town clerk shall so certify to the Board of Selectmen and put a comma there before the and then it goes on, and any applicable ordinance, no comma after ordinance, will become effective after it's republished by the Board of Selectmen.
Okay. Everyone, we're good with that?
Sure.
All right, moving on. Okay. I'm down to 3.3 at this point.
I'd like to ask for qualification on 2.7. in the fourth line where it says inconsistent with the charter. I think conventionally we've been referring to the charter in this document everywhere as this charter. So I would like to suggest we change the to this. And then,
Okay.
and then we say, or applicable law. And then I think it's clearer if we say, or provisions of section 2.4, 2.5, and 2.6 of this article with the town clerk, and take out the except as provided.
I didn't follow that, but
Well, the
it's not
except is,
important to me.
the except as provided language really isn't, there isn't an alternative proviso in those sections. They just have to be done in accordance with those sections. So that's why I was saying, when we're saying,
My God.
where it had to be not inconsistent with, it would be not inconsistent with this chapter or applicable law or provisions of section 2.4, 2.5, and 2.6 of this article, because if we say applicable law, comma, with the town clerk, and then put in except as provided in section 2.4, 2.5, and 2.6 of this article, it seems to suggest that we don't give it to the town clerk if there's an exception in those articles, and it's just that exception language is modifying the wrong phrase. So
Okay.
I'm just trying to clean up the
Okay.
grammar to
Everyone-
eliminate an ambiguity.
We're gonna need another meeting, Rick, if not
We-
6.
Pardon me?
I said, we are not gonna get through this tonight.
No,
No, we're not.
I mean, we're on page 7.
Okay, so we're gonna go to about 8:20, 8:25, and then we'll call it a night, and then we'll defer to our next meeting. Is that good?
Okay.
Unless everyone good with staying at this for another 20 minutes or so?
sure.
Okay,
Sure.
Maybe we can get through Article 3.
that would be great. Anything else under 2.7, Henry?
Yes, on the last sentence, where it says in accordance with section 3.5, 3.5 is broader than needed here. And if you look at 3.5, if we were to label,
You know, it's really hard. I think it's hard for everybody when we have to constantly reference another article. Should we modify it here, or should we modify section 3.5?
no, it needs to, what I want to do, just make a note of it. I'd like to have this say 3.5 paren B and C, so that it refers to two subsections of 3.5 rather than all of 3.5.
Okay, then let's go to that section, those sections. So we have a lot to review in sections 3.3, 3.5, and 3.6 specifically. So I'm gonna scroll down. I don't think we're proposing any change to our items 3.1, 3.2. It was just wordsmithing where we changed item 3.3.1. So Henry, what was it within, let's see, general powers and duties?
Well, first of all, under general powers and duties, under 2, to create or abolish by ordinances, agencies, or commissions, except those provided in this chapter or by Connecticut general statutes. If you look at 8.26, 8.26 says, says that the Board of Selectmen shall or may create such other town agencies as shall be required from time to time by statute, unless otherwise governed by Connecticut statutes. The Board of Selectmen may create with town meeting approval, such agencies as the Board of Selectmen. So 8.26 requires the town meeting to act in some of these circumstances too. So it's 3.3A2 is somewhat in conflict with 8.26. And I would, what
Why
I
don't
would,
we put that
what I
det-
would suggest is we move 8.26 to here to be section 2.
I'm sorry, I'm confused by that. I don't know what you mean.
Well, 8.26 says how you can create new offices, and there's a requirement. They can do it in accordance with the statutes, and then if it's not statutorily designated, it has to be with town meeting approval. If you look at 3.3A2, it says to create or abolish by ordinance, agencies or commissions, except for those provided for in this charter or by the general statutes. It's allowing them to go ahead and create a new agency or commission without a town meeting. So
I think 8.26 clearly says they do need a town meeting to establish the additional commission.
right,
I think it's very clear.
8.26 is, but 3.3 says they don't need a town meeting.
No, it doesn't. I don't agree. It says that they can create, I'm sorry, I misinterpreted that. Why don't we get rid of accept and just get rid of accept those and just leave this as, put the word as in there,
Well, we could
provided
say,
for charter.
we could say
eliminate-
create or you could say create or abolish by ordinance, agencies or commissions in accordance with 8.26. We could say that of this charter.
Well, why do you need a town meeting to appoint a commission?
Well, I guess people who
Not
sat on
appointing,
this,
it's creating.
people who sat on this charter review commission in the past determined at some point that it was important to preserve to the town meeting what agencies got created in town, so that we didn't have an agency created for the baseball commissioner without a town meeting, or
But do we agree that's needed? They decided that in the past, but today, do we think we need that?
well, that's what I raised. It's a conflict. We have to decide how to resolve it.
See,
I don't
I'm
think
not
it's
sure we need a
conflict.
town meeting to do
I don't,
that.
I agree. I don't think we need a town meeting, and I'm actually, as we've gone back and forth on this, I'm fine with it just the way it is. Yeah, I don't want to restrict their ability to create commissions or other designated groups of, to represent the town, not so much to represent, but to attack the issues in the town. You know, it's, what I have a lot of trust in the Board of Selectmen and them using their power judiciously and appropriately.
That's
So
good.
Well, that means we just need to amend 8.26.
Right.
Take
Correct.
out
Yes,
with town meeting approval.
yes.
Correct.
Fine with me.
Right.
Okay, let's
That's
pass over this. Is everyone good with that?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. I want to make sure that I'm putting under this section 8.26 amend, because I want to make sure next time we don't forget to do it, because we're not going to get to item 8 tonight. So no changes until we get to,
I'd
Three-
like, excuse me, Rick, I'd like to propose one more on 3.3A. I think it would be advisable to add a new subsection 8 to say, to exercise legislative powers consistent with this charter, so that we make it clear that their powers include the legislative power, because B is where legislative power is referenced, but B leads out with saying these are their duties, not their powers. So in order to have it be a power, we should say under powers, they have legislative powers under the charter.
So that would be 7.
Number
A7.
8, yeah, on page 9, it would be adding a number 8
8?
before you got to B.
Oh, I see. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, a number 8.
And it would say what?
To exercise legislative powers consistent with this charter.
Where is that going?
As
Right
number
before
8,
B.
A8 before paragraph B.
It's above what we're looking at.
Rick, can you scroll back?
It's up a little higher. It would be right up, right there, right under 7, it would be 8.
Okay,
And it would be to add item 8 to execute legislative powers consistent with this charter
Exercise.
Yeah.
exercise.
We don't want to kill them. We just want to do them.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you. Okay, we're good there?
Yeah.
Then we,
I just have an idea on number 1, under where you see the yellow highlight 15,000.
yes,
I'd say the Board of Selectmen shall cause the town administrator and all agencies to abide by the formal bid and purchase procedure and purchasing term, bid and purchasing procedure. And then whatever the bid and purchasing procedure is what I have to abide by. Because what, I keep getting back to this, once we start putting dollar amounts in everything, it keeps the Board of Selectmen from making changes as inflation hits.
Well, again, this comes back to whether it's the town electors that should decide what the threshold is for having
Right.
to go out to bid, or whether we want to delegate it to the selectmen. So that's the choice that's being made here. Keeping a number in has more to do with than just making it easier to change. It's saying who should make that decision, or when can that decision be made or limited.
Yeah, but isn't the Board of Selectmen sort of, their actions are prescribed by their budget? You know, they
Well-
can't just go willy-nilly spending a ton of money that hasn't been allocated to them in the budget.
so really the question breaks down to there's 3 different levels of control here. There's charter control, there is town meeting control, and then there's Board of Selectmen control. So where do you want the control ultimately for that to be? If Mark's comment that it might not ideally be in the charter, I agree with. But maybe we want to reference that if we're going to change an amount, a threshold amount like that, that it's done at a town meeting, so it can be done more frequently than once every 10 years.
see, I guess I'm thinking you need to have some dollar amount to go out to formal bid. I mean, bidding, it can be a pain, but it's,
I don't
mean,
think
I
that's the point, Judy. I think the point is where should that power to change it reside, not what the amount should be. So should we have an amount in the charter,
the
or
charter.
should we delegate it elsewhere? And if we do delegate it elsewhere, is it at a town meeting or Board of Selectmen? Those are the only 2 avenues we have, correct? Or referent,
Yeah, it's a good way to couch it. Very good. That's the
So-
decision.
So, if we don't feel it should be in here because we want it to be a more fluid number, given inflation, then the next level of control would be via a town meeting. And the easiest way to address it, which it has less control for the town, is the Board of Selectmen. So just to try and move this forward, could we frame this? Do we want to leave it here, town meeting, or Board of Selectmen? And if we know that, then we'll know how to come up with the verbiage.
Okay, so when do we send it to a town meeting? And because it's the town meeting's going to decide.
If that number that we see here changes. So if we eliminate the number in here
Yeah,
and we say that, and we use, a bid, we're talking about formal bid and purchase procedure.
Yeah.
And part of defining procedure is the threshold that triggers certain actions. Do we want to define the dollar amount here or at a town meeting if we need to change it, or by the Board of Selectmen?
So the Board of Selectmen could put into their bidding procedure the threshold for using that.
Yeah, I mean,
And
Okay,
that's
so-
where it is. That's
Okay.
where all the thresholds are in the bid and purchasing procedure.
So
that the
do you
Board of
want-
Selectmen set.
so let me phrase the
Okay.
rest of the question. Do you want the Board of Selectmen to be able to change the bid threshold by their action? Or do you want to mandate that it go to a town meeting?
So what it could be read here, it'd be pursued a formal bid procedure in purchasing any item exceeding such amount as shall be determined by the Board of Selectmen from time to time, or any amount exceeding a certain dollar threshold is determined by the town meeting from time to time.
Exactly. You said it better than I could, Henry.
Boy, I
But-
sure don't, I sure don't want to go to the town meeting where they're having that conversation.
I'm comfortable with this power residing with the Board of Selectmen. I look at this as an administrative function. We trust them with far bigger issues than what a bid threshold needs to be.
Right. So rather than have it here, it's in our, ordinances or whatever guidelines that are created.
And quite frankly, this is a substantial change in the charter to take the control of this out of the charter and stick it into the realm of the Board of Selectmen. And I'm fine with that personally.
Just so everyone knows, in the Town of Columbia's Board of Selectmen bid and purchase policy, it states any purchase of a good or service greater than 15,000 requires sealed bids. So they've already determined all the limitations of where I need to go for verbal quotes, written quotes, and sealed bid quotes. But
Right.
I'm not comfortable having one of those limitations in the charter where this is a detailed document, very detailed document that the board addresses every, say 4 years.
So we could put it then per policy.
Right.
Well,
Board of
if you're,
Selectmen policy.
if you want to go with the concept that leave it to the Board of Selectmen, then the language that Mark Walter suggested is the way to go. And just stop the sentence after the word procedure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Makes
Right.
a lot of sense.
Or remove the ambiguity by saying adopted by the Board of Selectmen from time to time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's good.
Good.
As needed or based on inflation or something.
And
No, I
then,
don't tie it to anything.
Yeah.
and then clearly they have the legal right under the charter to do that. And nobody could claim that it would need to be brought to a town meeting.
Right,
Yeah, let's do it that way. Is everyone good with that?
yes.
Okay,
And just so everyone knows, there's a safeguard whenever we don't exactly follow that policy for extenuating circumstances. The Board of Selectmen I have to bring it to the board to say, I don't recommend going with the low bidder and this is why. And then they have to vote.
okay. I'm very comfortable taking the dollar limitation or the dollar threshold out of the charter.
Out of the
So,
charter.
okay,
Okay. Now that makes sense. It's somewhere else. It's a policy somewhere else.
okay, good. Good point. Thank you, Mark.
Sure.
I'm sure when I reference Mark, it's always in context which Mark it is. I won't use last names. Okay, let's try and get through the rest of 3.
I'd like to point out in B2 that this is the only place where we name some of these offices, and like tax collector, town clerk, town treasurer, and so forth in the charter. That's okay, but I'm just asking everybody to focus on that and say that we're leaving this totally up to the Board of Selectmen, and theoretically they can change the job description to add duties to the town clerk or take them away, et cetera, et cetera.
As opposed to what?
Well, as opposed to the fact that we have tree wardens and fire wardens and other appointed positions where the specifics of what the person is supposed to do is harder. We don't get specifics for any of these hired positions. I think that was decided originally in order to remove politics from them and get continuity, and it all made sense. But I just point out that, there's no place that specifies what the duties of the director of the public works are, or the town planner, et cetera. It's all a matter of if the statute says something or the Board of Selectmen make a determination. And that's fine. I'm not saying it's broken. I'm just pointing it out that we have details about certain appointed and certain elected officials and agencies, but nothing in detail about these.
I don't know that I don't feel a need to expand the document to provide those kind of descriptions and things.
No, I'm fine with the selectmen deciding what those people should do. If they're,
Are we all good with this, the way it's written then?
Yeah.
Okay, with the modification. Yeah, we're good with it the way it is. Let's go down to item 4. We'd gone through these changes.
Mhm.
We're good with all this.
yeah,
Let's go to 3.4B.
Just moving C from above down there.
Yes, that's good. 3.5. Yeah, these changes are all good. Thank you, Rich.
I got to back you up to 3.5 is where we were talking about before under
Under 2.7.
2.7. And what I wanted to do with 3.5 or suggest doing with 3.5 is the paragraph that starts at least, label that as paragraph A. The next paragraph that starts every ordinance, label that as paragraph B.
Okay,
And then where the last paragraph would be C. And then in the references, where it cross references 2.7 to 3.5, the proper cross references would be to B and C and not to A.
I'm fine with that. Is everyone good with that?
yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
and then under procedure, under 3.4, where it says all meetings of the Board of Selectmen for the transaction of business shall be open to the public. I think we should say other than a proper executive session or something like that, that makes reference to the fact that the public can be excluded under certain circumstances, because this suggests you could never exclude the public.
So can we put a clause in front of all to say, except in the case of executive session, comma, all?
Rich, do you feel we need that exception in here? Because is by definition at the state level, executive session is not open to the public?
Well, we have the ability in our charter to open executive sessions if we wanted to. And that's what this seems to do.
But my question to Rich Roberts was, is there a need for this in here if we want executive sessions closed to the public?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just to close the loophole, you can reference the Freedom of Information Act, but I guess technically in executive session, you're not transacting business.
I was wondering about that.
Okay. So the answer to my question would be, you think we should put this in here or not necessary?
I don't think it's necessary because you're not transacting business in executive session and FOIA would prevail over the charter anyway.
Right, you're not voting on anything in executive session.
Okay, then so technically it's no longer a meeting, but is it a meeting if there's a quorum there?
That's a good point.
Well, I think the point is whether it's a meeting for transaction of business. And so I'm wondering whether those two commas should not be taken out.
I understand that, but I know from, there's also statutes that govern if there's more than X number of members of a board or commission present, no matter where that is, if they're all in one place together, that's considered a meeting.
And when you go into executive session, it's everybody's there
Who is at the regular meeting.
who is at the regular meeting.
So maybe we should put that exception in there just to make it crystal clear. So Henry, what would you propose we say where exactly again?
Let's leave it to Rich to put something in. I'm happy with that, but I think it does offer a little bit more protection to have it there.
Yeah, sounds like it.
All right,
Okay.
Rich, I'm thinking that those two commas and before and after for the transaction of business are superfluous and confusing.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
All right,
Okay,
In 3.5A, it talks about posting a notice in a public place. In the next page, we change that in the red.
can't hear you, Henry. Yeah, you got to turn toward the,
Okay, in the second to last line of 3.5A, it says, has language say by posting a notice in a public place. We use language in the new red line on 3.6 about.
Can't hear you.
you got to face the.
There, can you hear me now?
Now we
Yes.
can hear you.
Okay, sorry, I came partly unplugged there. In 3.5, the first paragraph, second to last line, there's language that says by posting a notice in a public place. We add new language in 3.6 about posting in a public forum so that we can post it on the website. So I like that idea. So I would suggest we just change place to forum here. So by posting a notice in a public forum.
So
Yeah,
rather than
that's
put it in
good.
a newspaper, you're thinking it just can go on our website?
Well, no, this language says it has to go in the newspaper and a public forum unless the legislature allows us to do something else. So we got that covered, but I think a public forum is better than a public place.
and it's consistent.
Yes.
Yeah, I like the word forum better. Okay, let's go with that. Everyone good with that?
Yeah.
Okay, we're running out of time here. We'll get through section 3 and we'll be done for the evening. Thanks, everybody. So section 3.5 we discussed. 3.6, good with the way it is.
I think there's a word missing in the last paragraph, second to last line. It says days by timely publishing, and the word should be and posting notice.
You know, here's something that I have a strong feeling about, and I haven't brought up prior to now. I don't think we should mandate specific way of publishing. Just state that we just have to be in conformance with Connecticut general statute for emergency ordinances and notices. And everywhere throughout here where it describes where we have to publish something, I don't think a specific method of publishing should be mandated. It should just conform with state statute. Because think about what the last 10 years has brought in changes in communication. What is the next 10 years going to bring? And then we want to make this document usable 9.5 years down the road.
I think that's a really good point, Rich.
But that's what the new language in the first paragraph of 3.6 allows.
Yeah, but then when you get in the first paragraph,
Your first paragraph, and all we're doing here is saying publishing and posting notice of such extension in the manner provided above. So it refers back to that paragraph above. And it says there, in a newspaper or by other means approved for such purposes by any applicable state law, regulation, or order.
So why would we put newspaper in here? Because quite frankly, I'm hoping in the next 2 years, there will be no publishing in newspaper, any notices of any sort.
but it says or.
Okay, do you think we're good the
Or
way it
other
is?
means approved by such purpose.
Yeah, so I think as long as there's another means approved, you don't have to use the newspaper.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll leave it then. I think we're good on the rest of these, aren't we?
Yep,
Then we got through section 3, and let's call it a night.
sounds good.
Is everyone good? I'll make a motion that we adjourn
At 8:30.
Second,
at 8:30. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you for your patience, everybody. And I'm sorry I was late this evening. But my dog Zeus was probably very happy with me.
Good night,
Thank you.
all.
Good
Rich,
night.
Night.
Mark, everybody,
Bye.
good night.
Okay.